This house now belongs to our oldest son and his wife. If you're not part of the family, you should leave now. Even though I've been paying the mortgage for this house, my in-laws and husband shocked me with their statements. They've been using me to pay off the mortgage all along. When I found out, I went from feeling thankful to really angry. Fine then, I'll move out, I said defiantly to their teasing. I'll show them they shouldn't mess with me. I quickly found someone to help me plan my revenge against them. My name's Michelle Anderson, I'm 48 years old, and I work as a lawyer. Right now, I'm living with my husband and his parents, taking care of them. It all started when I gave a house to my in-laws. I married James when I was 30. Right before our wedding, my father-in-law got hurt and couldn't walk. He had to use a wheelchair, and my mother-in-law was old and needed help too. So, I gave them a house without barriers. At first, we thought about living in public housing, but then we chose a place in between where my husband and I worked. I suggested this so we could get to them fast if there was an emergency. The Anderson family helped me a lot with my dad. Let me repay the favor, I said. My dad passed away before I got married. Right before he died, he had a lot of debt, which made things really hard for us financially. We struggled getting more debt to pay off the old ones. My husband and his family were the ones who rescued us from this tough situation. James and his parents paid off my dad's debts for us. If you're worried about marrying because of the debt, wouldn't it be solved if we paid it off, said James. That's right, it's debt from a business failing, not from spending recklessly. We should help, added my mother-in-law. Yes, we should help each other out when times are tough. There's nothing to be embarrassed about, said my father-in-law. So they helped with most of the debt without saying much. Both my dad and I were really grateful, and I worked hard to pass the bar exam. The total borrowed from my husband's family was about $50,000. I was sure I could pay it back once I became a lawyer. I didn't want the debt hanging over me forever. My main goal was to pass the bar exam and become a lawyer, with a strong promise to pay back the money I owed. I kept studying hard to become a lawyer. With that determination, I buried myself in books, and after lots of effort, finally passed the bar exam. My dad and in-laws celebrated my success, and I was really happy to start my career in law. I found a job quickly and started working at a law firm. The boss was really nice, and I learned a lot from experienced lawyers, getting better at my job over time. Over time, I gained some special clients and now have an important job at the office as a female lawyer, making more than $100,000 a year. Because of my success, I managed to pay back all the money I owed to my dad and my in-laws. But after my mom died, my dad passed away soon after, leaving me alone. That's when James asked me to marry him. He said, "You're strong on your own, but I want to be the one who supports you. I'll always treasure you, so please marry me." His words convinced me, and we decided to get married, hoping for a happy life together. Around that time, sadly, my father-in-law had an accident. Remembering how kind they had been to me before, I offered to build them a new house without barriers. Even though they didn't want to accept, the gratitude I felt was too big to put into words. "Please don't say no. I want you all to live comfortably," I sincerely told them, not just saying it to be nice. They could tell I meant it, and with a small smile, they agreed. But then they added something. "Michelle, why don't you live with us too? We heard you and James are looking for a new house." "That's right. If you don't mind, let's live together. Eventually, this house will be yours." James has an older brother who moved out a few years ago to start his own business. He had an agreement with James that in exchange for taking care of their aging parents, James could use the family stuff freely. Before leaving, he talked to James about this. Moving to the new house would make my commute shorter, and we'd live with James and his parents. Since we could help each other when needed, there was no reason to say no to living together. But I worried I might cause trouble for my in-laws. Before getting married, I had occasionally caused trouble for them, so I worried if living together was right. James sensed my concerns and comforted me, saying, "Don't worry, Michelle. I'm here for you. Let's live together confidently." Encouraged by James, I agreed to live with my in-laws, hoping for a happy life with the four of us. But reality was different from what I expected. Every day, they would ask me for help with small things like finding clothes or fixing the TV remote. They seemed to rely on me for everything, especially my disabled father-in-law, who often touched me without hesitation. "I already hung up your morning clothes, Mom," I reminded her. "That's the air conditioner remote, not the DVD remote. It's on the desk, Dad." Please ask James for help with physical tasks when he's around. I can't always be there for you. I found myself saying these things every day. At first, I tried my best to fulfill the family's needs, even though I was already handling the mortgage and all the household chores. Sometimes I thought about getting a divorce, but James always handled things well, and my in-laws would apologize. Since I didn't feel mistreated, I usually decided not to divorce. Day-to-day life was filled with their dependence and small annoyances, but I felt a bond with them as family, which made me endure it. Still, the thought of divorce crossed my mind now and then. My mother-in-law started showing signs of memory loss, which might be mild dementia or just forgetfulness. It's hard to tell for sure. The questions from my mother-in-law kept increasing, and James, who had promised to help before we got married, turned out to be unreliable in this situation. Living with these uncertainties, I gradually got used to the situation. Through experience, I started handling everything on my own and began speaking up clearly to James and others. But my father-in-law's behavior bothered me a lot. I told James and my mother-in-law, I can't ignore how father acts lately. He pretends to have dementia just to touch me, Mom. Please do something. The doctor said, your father-in-law hasn't been clearly diagnosed with dementia. His symptoms are mild, so it's not certain if it's dementia or not. But my in-laws insisted it was dementia, even though the doctor wasn't sure. I understood if it was really dementia, but using an illness as an excuse to make others tolerate bad behavior wasn't okay. I talked to James and asked my in-laws to address it, but James kept avoiding the issue. When I was almost at my breaking point, something unexpected happened. As I was organizing our finances one holiday afternoon, I saw something in the bank book that made me smile. By the end of that month, we would finally finish paying off the mortgage for my in-laws' house. Filled with a sense of accomplishment, I felt like a heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was thrilled at the idea of having less financial strain and more money to spend freely. But little did I know, a new challenge was about to emerge. One evening during dinner with the family, James suddenly brought up the topic of the mortgage being paid off. Michelle, the mortgage for this house will be fully paid off this month, right? He asked out of the blue. Since he'd never mentioned the mortgage before, I was surprised by his sudden interest. But he smiled warmly as he poured beer into a glass. Yes, that's correct. But why the sudden interest? I asked. Because we should celebrate, right? You've been through a lot, Michelle. I want to thank you with a big celebration, James explained. His unexpected words touched me deeply. I was moved that James had considered my struggles and wanted to show his appreciation. Despite wishing he'd help more with household chores, I was grateful for his care and concern. His words instantly eased my frustrations, and I couldn't help but smile with joy. James, thank you. Can I look forward to the celebration? James said, sure, we'll talk about it together as a family and get ready. Just hold on, Michelle, feeling relieved by his words. I was excited about getting ready for the celebration, but that happy feeling didn't last. Soon, I realized something wasn't right. I accepted James' invitation without thinking too much. It seemed like my in-laws had also heard about the talk and were planning something together. A few weeks later, James and my in-laws asked to meet me. Since work wasn't too busy and I was in a good mood, it seemed like a perfect time for a celebration. Sorry for calling you in suddenly. We have something important to discuss, James said. It's fine, no worries, I replied. Today, we as a family need to talk to you about something important, Michelle, my father-in-law said. What's going on? I thought it was all about the celebration. So why were they sounding so serious? Hoping they'd just talk normally, I decided to listen. Well, now that the mortgage payments are ending, we want you to move out, they said. What? I couldn't help but sound surprised. They wanted me to leave once the mortgage was paid off. What did they mean? Was it a mistake? The unexpected words made me think it must be a mix-up. I couldn't understand what James was saying, and I couldn't find the right words to respond. I was just confused. Seeing me like that, my in-laws didn't want to wait for me to figure it out and started explaining. We sold this house to our oldest son and his wife. My father-in-law told me. What? I exclaimed, shocked to the core. My mind was spinning, struggling to grasp what was happening. To be suddenly told to leave the house, and on top of that, to learn that it had been handed over to James' older brother and his wife was beyond belief. What did all my efforts for this family mean now? Did this mean my role was over? But how? I couldn't accept this unfair and unreasonable situation. We have this beautiful house now. Your role here is no longer necessary. We tolerated you until the mortgage was paid off, but now the house belongs to us. You're no longer needed," my mother-in-law continued. I had lived in this house with James's family, feeling grateful towards them. Out of that gratitude, I stayed silent until now. But it hit me that it was all a charade. Even their help to my father and me was part of their plan to get something for me. Realizing this truth, I felt deeply betrayed and disappointed. Being suddenly estranged from a family I trusted was a crushing blow to my mental well-being. The trust I had built over the years shattered instantly. It felt like everything I believed in was just an illusion. My heart ached with the knowledge that they knew I was working hard to become a lawyer to clear my father's debts, so they took a chance, thinking the investment could pay off. It was a ploy to get me to buy the house. "We thought we'd get a good return if we showed you kindness since you and James started dating. We figured the investment wouldn't go to waste," she added. "When you were grateful for us helping your father and gave us expensive wine as a thank you, we thought you were easy," she continued. "It was before my father's business went downhill. We used to be well off. James seemed interested in my family's wealth from the start. He must have seen an opportunity because he knew I wanted to become a lawyer. I trusted James and his family completely, without realizing how naive I was. That's why we came up with this plan. We hope to gain something big by helping your father," he said. Their confident and shocking statements were difficult for me to believe. "So, it's worked out perfectly. We have a fantastic new house in our name, and once the mortgage is paid off, it's all ours. What we do with our property is none of your concern," they declared. Their words were full of planning and determination, and I struggled to accept the truth. It took me a while to realize that everything had been orchestrated from the start. For 13 years, they had been patiently waiting for this moment. They never truly cared for me or my father. We were just a means to an end. Their plan was to get close to our family right from the beginning, and we fell into their trap without realizing. Faced with this shocking revelation, darkness consumed my heart. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, drowning in despair. I couldn't grasp everything they had planned and executed, so outsiders should leave this house immediately. "You have no place here anymore," their words cut even deeper into my wounded heart. Realizing I was no longer welcome in this house left me speechless. This place, once filled with peace, love, and warmth, now felt empty and cold. A chapter of my life had closed, and I was about to embark on a new, lonely journey. "Your belongings need to be packed, James. You can't leave immediately, or you'll be in trouble. Let's do it tomorrow. I'll give you until then to pack properly and leave," my mother-in-law declared. "This house now belongs to the Anderson family," my father-in-law added. "And I'll get the divorce sorted out. There's no point in us staying together anymore, and I'm tired of your complaints. Make sure you've signed the papers by the time you leave this house tomorrow," James said. The words Anderson family hit me hard. It was now crystal clear that I had never truly been accepted by them. Was I treated unfairly, forced to work tirelessly and juggle house chores and my job, because I wasn't seen as part of the family? All my doubts blended together, leaving me with only a bitter smile. "I was fooled by your family right from the start," I whispered. "That's right. Are you stupid? Don't you understand?" James snapped. His words shattered something inside me. I lowered my gaze, then slowly lifted my head, forcing a smile as I gave an unexpected reply to my in-laws. "Then I'll leave," I said. My heart couldn't find a reason to stay with the Anderson family anymore. All those days were filled with deceit. From now on, my life will take a new path. As I suddenly showed a cheerful face and decided to leave the house without a heavy heart, my in-laws couldn't hide their surprise. "Quite obedient, aren't you? Got something up your sleeve?" my mother-in-law asked suspiciously. "No plans," I replied. Hearing such an unbelievable story, I felt like my life had hit rock bottom, and my love for their family disappeared in an instant. "I'll pack up my things right away and leave. I'll sign the divorce papers properly. My lawyer will get in touch with you about dividing the property. Goodbye and thank you for everything," I said without waiting for my in-laws' response. I went back to my room and packed my belongings, holding back my tears as I planned my next steps. After being treated so badly, I couldn't just let it go quietly. I couldn't find peace until they felt the pain, suffering, and unfairness I had endured. While packing, I calmly thought of ways to get back at them. I planned carefully how to hurt them the most. Many ideas crossed my mind as I considered my next moves. My anger and disappointment towards my in-laws were overwhelming. but I stayed composed, searching for the best way to handle the situation. My revenge had to be more than just emotional. They needed to understand the consequences of their actions. My new life started there. While packing, my phone rang suddenly. Seeing the caller's name, a plan formed in my mind. I was sure this person would support me, so I answered without hesitation. After explaining my situation, the caller listened carefully and we promptly made a plan for the future. Once I finished packing, I quietly left the house I had lived in for years, without saying a word to James and his family. I decided to cut all ties with them, so I deleted their contacts from my phone, determined not to respond to any communication from them. My decision soon paid off. The day after I left, I received numerous frantic calls from my in-laws. Although I had deleted their numbers, their long association weighed heavily on my mind. That morning, they must have realized I had left and understood what had happened. However, I had no intention of answering their calls. As I looked at my phone, I felt a sense of empowerment over my decision and smiled lightly. At that moment, the person who had provided me with a new place to live reassured me, saying, "You don't have to answer the phone at all." I gratefully nodded at his words. I was ready to take the first step towards a fresh start. My life was about to begin a new chapter in a new environment. As the calls from my mother-in-law ceased, James began bombarding me with his own calls. Each one felt like unbearable noise. Finally, unable to take it anymore, I turned off my phone and, without turning it back on, canceled the service. It was a clear message that I was ending things with James. 3 months went by, and I had started a new life in a fresh apartment, away from the stress of living with my in-laws. I could focus more on my work, and my daily life became more satisfying. I embraced life to the fullest, free from the constraints of the past. People noticed a change in me post-divorce. I radiated happiness, and my demeanor became more cheerful and friendly. This transformation didn't go unnoticed, and I received many compliments. Despite the mental strain from my past relationship with my in-laws, I decided to nurture my relationships with colleagues at work and foster positive connections. I resolved to put more effort into my job and prioritize communication with my coworkers. As I made this decision, the receptionist at my office appeared on the floor in a panic, urgently informing me, "Miss Cohen, there's a parent and child at the reception looking for you." Cohen was my maiden name, which I retained after the divorce. Hearing her report, I hurried to the reception to find out what was going on. The usually composed receptionist's agitation signaled that something was amiss. Something significant must have caused her distress. Seeing her worried expression, I wanted to offer support, and a male colleague, sensing her state, volunteered to accompany me. Together, we made our way to the lobby. Upon arrival, my expression shifted dramatically as I laid eyes on who was there. My mother-in-law and James. They were causing a scene, loudly berating me for cutting off contact. Their irrational behavior left me stunned and questioning. Others in the office couldn't hide their shock at their actions. Their worn-out appearances, filled with anger, stood out after months of absence. Recognizing the abnormal situation, the reception staff alerted upper management, and soon the office manager appeared in the lobby. "Miss Cohen, a meeting room is ready. Shall we have a discussion there with your in-laws?" "I'll inform him," the manager suggested. Having already briefed the manager on everything, I agreed to the suggestion. Feeling uneasy about going alone, I brought my colleague with me. He was the lawyer I had hired for the matter with James, so they allowed his presence. Heading to the meeting room, I tried to suppress my confusion and agitation. Despite my inner turmoil and anxiety about what lay ahead, I found some relief in the manager's calm demeanor and resolved to proceed step by step. As we walked to the meeting room, my mother-in-law and James glared at me with anger. Despite their dire situation, they seemed displeased to see me thriving at work. Their gaze and attitude left no doubt about their feelings. Sitting across from my in-laws, we exchanged tense glances, and then the manager entered the meeting room with someone else. "Sorry I'm late." "What? Why are you here?" The person the manager brought was James's brother, my brother-in-law. He stood there, glaring at the two with an angry expression. "There's nothing to say. You guys have really done something ridiculous. My brother-in-law used to be a gang leader in his youth, but now runs his own construction company. His employees call him boss, and he can't stand unjust behavior. When I lost my place to live, he helped me out for several weeks in a women's dormitory. He was already aware of the situation with my in-laws' house and, after hearing the details, offered his support right away. Why didn't he know when my in-laws told me to leave the house? They said they had sold it to their eldest son and his wife. I found out everything from Susan and confirmed it. You didn't think you could do such a horrible thing to Michelle and get away with it, did you? As soon as Susan's name was mentioned, James and his mother looked astonished. Susan, his wife and the mastermind behind this incident, had always harbored hostility towards me. Despite my brother-in-law's wishes, she had been a housewife up to this point. It wasn't my brother-in-law's instruction, but her own decision. She believed women were meant to be homemakers, as her own parents had been. So housekeeping was natural for her, and she saw women who defied this as not real women. When Susan saw me, she probably viewed me with envy. My dedication to work for nearly 40 years might have seemed dazzling to her. Additionally, Susan wasn't skilled at cooking. Even my brother-in-law and father-in-law had asked my mother-in-law to teach her, as I had heard from James. On the other hand, I managed household chores well while balancing my job. Perhaps she envied my ability to handle everything efficiently. Every time Susan encountered me, she made snide remarks. She accused me of neglecting household duties or leaving them to my husband, hurling harsh words at me for decades. However, my brother-in-law always intervened, which likely added to Susan's dissatisfaction. He supported Susan's desire to work and helped with household tasks. Susan's inaction in improving her situation was her own choice, and it was unfair for her to take out her frustrations on others. When my brother-in-law warned Susan, she redirected her discontent towards me. Susan confessed that she had orchestrated the entire plan to take over the house and pressure me into buying it. She manipulated my mother-in-law and father-in-law to execute this scheme. They probably believed they could obtain their own house and continue pretending to be senile, leaving me unable to object. They had found ways to orchestrate the plan without involving my brother-in-law, whom they couldn't contact because of Susan. James had also accepted a reward for assisting them in this scheme, making them all accomplices. The only person unaware was my brother-in-law, who would have stopped such foolish actions if he had known. This likely filled him with regret, explaining why everyone behaved timidly whenever he visited. When my brother-in-law came over, my parents-in-law didn't take any action, likely fearing the consequences if he found out about the situation. The manager and my colleagues watched my in-laws with astonishment. So, how do we proceed? I have no intention of forgiving even a fraction of the insult I received, let alone the trouble caused to Michelle, I stated firmly. But it was Susan's suggestion, James protested. That's right. We were just misled by clever words. It wasn't intentional, my mother-in-law added. At James' statement, my patience wore thin. I stood up, my face burning with anger, and yelled at my mother-in-law and James. How can you claim innocence after such a betrayal? Do you have any idea how much pain I've endured in these 13 years? My suppressed emotions burst forth, and tears of anger and frustration streamed down my cheeks. My mother-in-law and James had never seen me cry before, no matter the hardship I faced. Even when my father-in-law was wrongly considered senile and acted recklessly, I never shed a tear. In their eyes, I was always a strong woman who never faltered. Seeing me raise my voice and cry must have been shocking for them. Do you realize how grateful I was to you? How much I wanted to repay you? And now to discover that your care for my father was driven by such selfish motives. I may forgive you, but I will never forget. With those words as a cue, my brother-in-law brought someone into the meeting room, a man in a black suit. He sat opposite us, his gaze fixed on my in-laws. You will have to take responsibility for this, he declared. Faced with this unexpected turn of events, my mother-in-law exclaimed in surprise. This man is my lawyer, hired by my brother-in-law. He is a respected attorney in our office, like a mentor to me. We intend to seek compensation for the unfair treatment I've endured, I explained. What do you mean? It's pointless to dwell on the past now, James argued. The past is irrelevant now. The lawyer, who had been quietly listening to my in-laws, adjusted his glasses and calmly refuted them. The current evidence and the basis for the future claim of damages make the lawsuit fully feasible, especially since there was no agreement not to claim property at the time of the divorce. In this case, there is no specific time limit for claiming compensation. As he spoke, the lawyer took out SSD from his pocket, leaving my in-laws confused. What is that? My mother-in-law asked. This is the record Michelle has been keeping. Her PC was equipped with a camera for remote meetings, and all your wrongful actions have been saved as data, the lawyer explained. My in-laws' expressions turned pale upon learning this truth. Michelle mostly worked in the living room, didn't she? Modern laptops often have built-in cameras, and your harassment in the living room has backfired, the lawyer said before pocketing the SSD. He then turned to my in-laws, stating firmly, "The ownership of the house is already in Michelle's name, and your eviction is just a matter of time. We will proceed with legal action promptly, so please prepare the funds." "Wait, you're saying it's changed to her name?" James reacted to the lawyer's statement. In response, my brother-in-law raised his voice. "I asked Michelle to change the ownership to her name. Thanks to you putting it in Susan's name without permission. The change was surprisingly easy. Anything to say about that?" My brother-in-law taunted James with a mischievous smile. James, who had never won a fight against his brother since childhood, couldn't argue back, and my mother-in-law also remained silent. "I will also properly bill you for all the expenses involved in that transfer. That's only fair, right? After all, it was your wrongful actions. If you don't deal with what you've started, we'll be in trouble too," said my brother-in-law, folding his arms and standing imposingly. "Wait, you're saying it's changed to her name?" he added sternly, throwing the words at them. The two were left speechless before my brother-in-law's firm demeanor. He had also informed Susan, his wife and the mastermind behind this ordeal, about the situation. After resolving this matter, he expressed his intention to divorce her over the phone. "I'm really sorry for involving you in this, Michelle. Even though I didn't know, I will support you fully until you are satisfied. Let me know any requests you have. It's my family who did this, so I have a responsibility too." My brother-in-law apologized sincerely, and I nodded in gratitude. This outcome was a significant achievement for me, especially considering that the maximum amount for moral harassment compensation is usually around $30,000. I felt nothing but gratitude. Fortunately, the house was returned to my possession within a few days. With my brother-in-law's supervision, the furniture and appliances were also moved back, and everything was successfully recovered. Currently, the house is being used as a rental property. It's too big for me, and with its good location and accessible features, it seemed wasteful not to utilize it. Following my brother-in-law's advice, I started renting it out. Susan is busy with work, trying to pay off her debts. Following my brother-in-law's instructions, she works tirelessly from morning till night, and my mother-in-law and James are in similar situations. My father-in-law, unable to work due to his disability, contributes from his pension towards the debt repayment, and they seem to be leading a challenging life. I feel relieved knowing my brother-in-law is a reliable person. Years have passed since then, and I continue my work as a lawyer. Thanks to my brother-in-law, the monthly payments are going smoothly, and it's expected to be paid off by next year. Despite often contemplating giving up amidst the hardships, I held on to the belief that my efforts would be rewarded someday. That belief has become a reality, and I live each day with gratitude.